The lake always looked the same. Calm, silver, endless. But for Margaret Hill, it held every storm she'd ever been through. Every Sunday morning, she sat on that same wooden bench alone with a cup of coffee and a small paper notebook. People in town had seen her there for years. They said she was the quiet lady by the lake, the one who always smiled but rarely spoke. No one really knew her story, but the lake did. Margaret once had a family, a husband named John, and a daughter, Lily. They used to come here together every weekend. Lily would feed ducks while John painted the clouds. Those were the kind of days that didn't seem special until they were gone. Then came the accident. A rainy night. A phone call. A silence that changed everything. Her husband gone. Her daughter gone. For months, Margaret couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even look at the world outside her window. The house felt like a graveyard of memories. She used to whisper, "Why me?" But the walls never answered. One morning, she found herself standing at the lake again. She didn't know how she got there. Maybe her feet remembered what her heart had forgotten. She sat on the same bench where her family once laughed, and for the first time in months, she cried, really cried. Not the quiet kind of crying, the kind that empties your soul until there's nothing left but truth. When she finally looked up, an old man was standing nearby, tossing crumbs to the ducks. He smiled gently and said, "You know, the lake listens better than most people." She didn't reply. But somehow, his words sank deeper than anything she'd heard since the accident. Weeks turned into months. Margaret kept coming back to that same bench every Sunday, same time, same cup of coffee. The old man was often there too. He never asked questions. He just sat nearby, whistling softly, as if to remind her that silence didn't always mean loneliness. One morning, she brought her notebook. She started writing not stories or poems, just memories. The sound of Lily's laughter, John's habit of leaving the lights on, the smell of pancakes on Sunday. Page after page, she poured out everything she'd been holding in. And with each word, she began to breathe again. A year passed. Seasons changed. So did Margaret. Her gray hair grew longer. Her smile, a little easier. The pain didn't disappear, but it began to belong somewhere now, written safely between the pages of that notebook. One cold winter morning, she came to the bench and found a small wooden carving lying on it. A bird. On its tiny wings, someone had carved the words, "Keep flying." She looked around, but no one was there. Just the lake, the wind, and the soft echo of her daughter's laughter in the ripples of water. That day, she decided to do something she hadn't done in years. She went home, opened her dusty piano, and played. Her fingers trembled at first, but then the melody flowed. The same song she used to play for Lily at bedtime. The house didn't feel like a grave anymore. It felt like a story that hadn't ended yet. Months later, the town council placed a new sign near the bench. The bench of hope dedicated to those who found strength by the lake. And right beneath it, in smaller letters, inspired by a woman who believed love never leaves. No one told her who wrote it, but she smiled, knowing the lake had whispered her story to someone. Years passed. A new generation began walking by the water, young couples, children, dreamers, and the broken ones. Some sat on that same bench when life got too heavy, and there they found peace. Sometimes they'd find an old notebook resting beside the bench, its pages filled with stories of loss, healing, and hope. No one knew who left it there, but it didn't matter. What mattered was the feeling it gave, that even the deepest pain could bloom into kindness. Margaret's house still stands on the hill, empty, quiet, surrounded by the same wildflowers her daughter once planted. And down by the lake, every Sunday morning, people say they can still hear a faint piano tune floating through the breeze, soft, gentle, and full of life. The melody seems to whisper, "The storm may have taken everything, but not who I am. Grief may break you, but healing begins the moment you stop running from your pain. Sometimes, you don't move on, you move forward, carrying love in a different way. And that's where peace lives.